one thing I believe is that my physical body is kind of like a sheath for my mind, and my mind is kind of like a sheath for like my spirit. And this spirit is a very subtle thing. I can't explain it. But imagine it's kind of like, I don't know. This is kind of like more.
This is Todd Love talking, a veteran of the United States Marine Corps who served in Afghanistan.
I kind of like take this and that from different beliefs, but I think that my spirit is this thing that when you tap into it, like in a dream or something, where are you? You're like just in your consciousness or whatever, and then when you die, what do you become? You're just like this spirit again. You're kind of cleansed. This drop of water, this spirit, which is you, kind of becomes part of this other big thing of water, which is this super spirit, whatever it is, I don't know. But my point really is, I think that if you look at people and think that like you're just me in a different body living a different life.
I'm scared to death, you don't exist, but I'll take that risk. It's true, I can't resist.
Today we're going to tell you a story about different lives and how they're connected, how we're all connected, sometimes to people we've never met, and we're changed for the better. It's a two-part story, and we're going to tell you more about Todd Love in the second part. But to understand who he is, what he's endured, and why he feels thankful, we have to back up and tell you about someone else first. Someone Todd never met, and the effect he had on his family and on Todd. His name was Stephen Siller, New York firefighter, as brave as they come. This is Crazy Good Turns. We tell stories about people who do amazing things for others. I'm your host, Brad Shaw.
Yeah, I need you so desperately.
It was a great small community, very close-knit community. Everybody had large families back then, back in the 50s. It was great growing up. I had great parents, the most unbelievable parents that anyone could ever had. Always set a great example for their children. My father, very involved, and my mother, very involved in the Third Order of St. Francis, which is, they went around many times and helped the sick and the poor and all that kind of stuff. And this is what we saw all the time growing up as children. Many times I remember seeing my father going out at night when I was a small kid, and I'd say to my mother, "Hey, Mom, where's Dad going?" He said, "Going to the hospital to visit the sick." And I said, "Well, what does he do?" He says, "Well, sometimes he just visits them, talk to them, and sometimes he reads to them, and many times he prays with them." And so I was very early on in my life, I realized that I had a great role models in my life.
In the Siller family, little brother Stephen was the last to come along, but he was by no means the least.
So Stephen was our little miracle.
He came later than the rest of you guys?
Well, yeah, much later. I was closest in age. I was 14 years older than him, and my oldest brother was 25 years older than him. So he was a little miracle. My mom was 44, and my dad was 49 when he was born. And he became the very core of our family.
The family was dealt a blow, however, when their father died from complications related to surgery for diabetes when Stephen was still a young boy. It was completely unexpected.
He was gone. My brother was 8.5 years old. And, he was torn apart, to say the least, because I was already out of the house, at that time, and so were all my other siblings. Like I said, we're much older. So it was very difficult for him, and he was just so worried that my mother would get sick or something, and I remember him saying so many times, and especially to my sister Gina, who he confided in an awful lot, "Nothing's ever going to happen to Mommy, right?" Shortly thereafter, my mother did get sick with cancer. By the time, it was about a year and a half later, my mom had died by the time he was 10 years old. So he learned very early on that life can be cruel, to say the least.
The family, as families often do, rallied. Stephen had strong support from his older siblings. He recovered, he thrived.
I will say that by age 19, almost by 20, he was like on such a great path. But he was always so resilient in everything he did. And he brought such great joy to all his brothers and sisters and anyone he was around. He could make anybody laugh. He was a clown. He was a fireman before he was a fireman because they loved to bust, and he was a big buster, to say the least. So he had a great personality. He really had a great personality. But the thing that stood out the most is that he cared so much about his siblings. He just wanted to do whatever he could to bring some comfort in our lives. He was always worried about us more than he was worried about himself.
By his late 20s, Stephen Siller had a job helping others. He had become a New York City firefighter, Squad 1, Brooklyn.
They were the elite of the fire department, and they trained to help the firefighters, and they trained for terrorism. So he used to come home all the time and tell me, Frankie, we're going to get hit. Frank, we're going to, all this kind of stuff.
Did you worry about him as a firefighter even before 9/11?
Absolutely.
About his safety? It must have been worrying.
Yeah, my oldest brother was so concerned. He used to say to me all the time, I'm so worried about Stephen. I'm so worried about Stephen, because he knew his personality, he'd be the first one running in, to something. He would not hold back.
Okay, we've all heard stories of heroes on 9/11. You might have heard Stephen's story because he's one of them. But it's important to remember the sacrifice, the type of person he was. Like many of us, Frank remembers the day starting off beautiful. Stephen had finished his night shift, and he and Frank and brothers George and Russ had plans to meet up for a round of golf.
We're going to play in this beautiful golf course in New Jersey, which is about a half an hour from my home. It was a beautiful, gorgeous day. I mean, it was just a 10. And we were all excited.
They never got there, of course. Stephen was on his way when he heard that one of the Twin Towers had been hit by an airplane.
And he called his wife, and he's talking to Sally, and he said, tell my brothers I'll try to catch up with them later. And he turned his truck around and drove back to his firehouse.
Frank and the family learned later what happened. Stephen drove as far as he could to the Brooklyn Battery Tunnel. It had already been blocked off by authorities. Witnesses later said they saw Stephen stop his truck at the tunnel entrance, calmly get out, strap on 60 pounds of gear, and start running into the tunnel. He ran all the way to the Twin Towers, close to 3 miles. His family didn't know this at the time, but they knew him, and they knew.
I got a phone call later in the day from a firefighter that actually was a neighbor of Stephen, and he said to me, hey Frank, I'm down here, and I want to let you know that it's very, very bad. I said, I know, Rich, I could see it. And he goes, no, Frank, you don't understand. Stephen's on the missing list, and I could tell you that nobody survived this. And I says, thank you for the information, Rich. I appreciate it. I went back and I told my sisters my brothers what I heard, and my sister Gina let out a wail like couldn't believe, and everybody was brought to their knees and crying and upset.
They held a memorial a couple weeks later. Let's pause here just to say that no one would have blamed the Siller family in the slightest for doing what we all did at that time, just try to move on. But Frank and his brothers and sisters had other ideas. They wanted Stephen to be remembered for the person he was, as someone who helped others. They formed a foundation and played with a few names and concepts, and then it became clear.
It shifted pretty early on because there was a newspaper article that says he ran through the tunnel to the towers.
Yep.
So we knew right away that that's what we're going to call the run, tunnel to towers, because that's what it was. He ran through a tunnel to the towers. And so we just decided to call it Stephen Siller Tunnel to Towers Foundation.
The foundation is anchored by a 5K run every year to raise money to support military and first responders. It started in 2002 with 2,000 runners. Now it hosts 30,000 runners from 30 different countries. So life does go on, and in this case, Stephen and his brothers and sisters found purpose volunteering their time to run the foundation. But even Frank admits they never could have predicted the people they would help in life-changing ways that extend well beyond their 5K run, or how it would remind them, connect them, once again to their lost brother. Okay, this is the end of part 1. As I said, this is heavy stuff, but this is in part about a tunnel. And in every tunnel there's a light. So go make some tea, come back, we'll introduce you to Todd Love, Marine Corps veteran.
I'm gonna change this life somehow.
That's correct. My father, he was in the Marines. I think he joined in like the 1980, and then my grandfather was a Marine as well, and all of us joined when we were 18. So we were all very young when we joined. My grandfather was in for like 20 years.
Welcome back to Crazy Good Turns. I'm Brad Shaw. In part 1, we learned about Stephen Siller, a firefighter who died in 9/11, and his brothers and sisters who created the Stephen Siller Tunnel to Towers Foundation. Now we're listening to Todd Love, a Marine Corps veteran who came of age post 9/11 and went off to fight in the war spawned by it in Afghanistan.
I think what happened at 9/11 was, beyond words, beyond evil. It's really bizarre to think that, these people did that. When I joined, I wanted to make sure that that never happened again. That's really the biggest reason why I joined. I just wanted to fight the good fight.
Todd became a reconnaissance Marine in Afghanistan.
Well, what we did in Afghanistan is usually we did a lot of helo operations. So we would get dropped off by a helicopter and we would take like a compound that was pre-designated usually, not always. And that compound, like we always had empty sandbags on us. So like once we swept the place for any explosives or anything weird, or maybe there was people staying there, oftentimes we would pay them to leave.
So they would enter places, sweep them for explosives or dangerous individuals, then talk to people.
Ask them, what do you think of the U.S. troops being here? What kind of problems do you face on a daily basis? If you could change anything, what do you think needs to be changed to make Afghanistan a better country? What do you think of the Taliban? Have you had any contact with them? What tactics are they using? Anything that we could get out of them.
Yep.
And, it definitely, being a reconnaissance Marine, it changed my perspective on the war a lot because oftentimes the people we're fighting aren't the people we're fighting. Oftentimes it's people that are just there and are willing to get paid to shoot at us, or willing to get paid to plant the IEDs. Sometimes it's uglier than that.
Being a combat Marine in Afghanistan, you're risking your life every day, every minute. Todd's job was even more dangerous than most.
I was the point man. So what that means is I would get a list of these buildings the day before, and I would have to plan, the day out. What building am I going to go to first? I'm just leading everyone, and everyone's following my footsteps. That way, we're decreasing the possibility of someone stepping on an IED. If there was going to be someone to step on it, it would be me, and everyone else is following my footsteps.
So you're the tip of the spear with the very likely possibility that you're going to be the one that would step on an IED.
I was keenly aware of the possibility of stepping on an IED. In Sangin, Afghanistan at the time where I was, it was where a lot of the IEDs were coming from. That's where their factories were. That's where they were making the explosive material. We were finding the places too. I knew for a fact that they were all over the place, and I was just getting lucky.
Todd doesn't remember exactly how it happened. Only pieces of memories about it now. He recalls it like a fading dream or a nightmare.
I remember actually thinking I was in a compound and there really wasn't anyone living there, I don't think, for a long time. Overgrown with weeds and like shrubberies and stuff like that. And I remember just like looking at it, and part of me wanted to keep looking around this compound because I just felt off. I wanted to keep looking, but my platoon sergeant at the time said, all right, it's time to go. So we all lined up and was about to go out the door. And I remember the pathway at the doorway that I had walked in previously. But, instead of going right where I came from, I went left. And I don't even remember walking out of the door. Actually, I said I went left. I kind of know that that's the direction I went. But my last memory is like looking up this little pathway from the inside of this compound at this doorway.
Todd had stepped on an IED. His team leader suffered severe injuries, a lost eye, lost teeth. For Todd, it was much worse. He is what they call catastrophically injured, a triple amputee, both legs, half of his left arm. He woke up in a German hospital days later.
When I woke up, I was actually kind of happy because I thought, hey, I'm alive. I survived it. I didn't really have the emotion of like bummed out about it. I was just really happy. I was thinking about I'm going home. I get to see my family. When I first saw my parents, they were very, I don't know the word, overwhelmed. It was like they were struggling more than I was. And I was kind of confused by that. I think at first I was kind of mad at them for it. And I can't really explain it, but then I really had thought about it, and I was like, okay, like, do you have kids? Like, would you rather you lose your legs or your kid lose their legs? Ask any parent that, and they're like, unless there's something wrong with them, they're always going to give up their own legs before they would choose their child to lose their legs. So in a sense, my parents valued my legs more than they valued their own legs. So it's like they're losing something much more precious to them than if that comes off correctly.
Yeah, I
and I just kind of realized they're hurt too.
This was 2010. Todd went home and started a new life of learning all over again. He tried prosthetic legs, but he preferred being in a wheelchair, felt he could get around better. He learned to scuba dive and skydive, solo. He's got more than 100 solo jumps under his belt. The tough part about that, he admits, is sticking the landing without legs.
I just focused on the things that mattered. Like, I don't have legs, so what? I'm missing a hand, so what? I'm not in pain right now. I'm not always the most comfortable. I have discomfort and I do have pains every once in a while, but they come and go. It's almost as if I've grown tolerant to them. In comparison, the joys that I felt are much richer than any of the pain that I felt. Like, I feel deeply connected to people, my parents, my family, and the only time I am sad is when I realize the connection that I have could be deeper.
As we said, this episode is all about connections. So let's go back now. As the Siller family's 5K run grew each year, it began drawing scores of veterans to their event, many of them catastrophically injured, like Todd. The Sillers saw the need. In 2009, they started building smart homes for catastrophically injured veterans of war, the people on the front lines, as Stephen was on 9/11. They've helped nearly 50 vets with houses built or in the works, at an average cost of about $500,000 per house. This is Frank again, talking about the homes they build.
Well, first of all, the whole house could be run off an iPad. Many of the windowed blinds could be run off an iPad. They control their kitchen off of it. The stove, the sink can lower off their iPads. There's and many of the cabinets in the kitchen are open at the bottom, so it comes down. So if they're in their wheelchair, they don't have to ask somebody to get them a glass. Yep. To get a glass of water. You know what I mean? How would you like it if you had to ask somebody, my wife yells at me all the time because I do ask her for a glass of water. But how would you like it if you had to ask somebody for something all the time? They don't want to. They don't want to. They don't want to be a burden on anybody. And this is a small way for them not to ask for that kind of help.
Did you have any experience with smart homes or in any way?
No, because I ain't that smart. No.
Frank and Todd know each other. The Stephen Siller Tunnel to Towers Foundation built the smart home for Todd.
The house is beyond words. I can't really say what it's brought to my life because it's like the gift that keeps giving. It's always bringing new things.
Just lock the door behind you when you come.
I've lived here for maybe a year and a half. August 2014, so about a year and a half. I love it. It's absolutely beautiful here, and I have a pool table. That was one of my main things I wanted. I love shooting pool.
For Frank, this work is a renewed connection to the brother he lost in horrific circumstances nearly 15 years ago.
I see it in all these guys, my brother.
Yeah.
And every single one of them, I look at Todd, and I love Todd, and he knows how much I love him. And he just reminds me a lot of my brother. First of all, they're all young. Yep. And Stephen, was 34 when he died. But, they remind me at that age, the same kind of courage.
So that really is the connection for you then in terms of helping our servicemen and women, particularly those who have been catastrophically injured. I mean, that's...
Well, yes, they do remind me of Stephen, but the real connection is I know they went to war because of what happened on September 11, 2001. So I think that Stephen, without a doubt, would want us to take care of as many of these great heroes as we can, but most certainly these guys that are coming back that would never have survived before on the battlefield, if not for the advances in the medical field that they have today. So there's a special need out there, and we didn't know we were going to be part of it and part filling it, but we're very proud we are.
You may have noticed that Todd keeps an amazingly positive outlook on life. At the heart of it is a connection to people who want to help him, and having a smart home to call his home and where he feels at home only adds to it. This is someone who appreciates life every day.
I can do a lot of things independently. I can have guests. You know, it's like so many things. The backyard is absolutely beautiful. Like
It is.
You know, I have a beautiful back porch. I try to get a little bit of sun every day. Like I literally like will go out on the porch and like take my shirt off and just like look at the sun and like put my arms up and stretch. And it just, I feel so like alive. I'm just this life that's clinging to my body and like going through the universe. And the only reason I got to keep to tell this story is because countless people were in this process of making my life what it is. And then that's just from me being alive from the time that I got hurt. I can't even tell you how many people have made such a huge impact on my life. You know, sometimes it's people I don't even know, like Stephen Siller. You know, sometimes, you know, it's people like Frank, and I get to listen to his story. And honestly, I really look up to those guys in the foundation. I look at the story of how they got to do what they're doing. You know, you have this one guy that gets hurt, you're going to build him a house, and then even that was a pretty courageous thing, you know, like, and then you're going to sit there and say, okay, we're going to build 36 homes that are all going to cost a lot of money. These guys are like committed to this tremendous task of finding all this money, and not even just the money, but just making all the moving parts coming together. For me, I'm like, that's a pretty bold thing to do. You know, I can do the war thing, but like you start talking money and all this paperwork and all the fundraisers and planning and the logistics, like that's for me, my brain is like broken parts, you know, like grinding gears and I can't even like fathom that. So I look at that from this outer perspective of just like, I don't know how they do it. They're almost crazy.
After something that I can't let it go.
I'm Brad Shaw, and thanks for listening to this episode of Crazy Good Turns. Go to crazygoodturns.org to learn more about Stephen Siller Tunnel to Towers Foundation and submit your ideas for extraordinary people and organizations we should feature. You might have noticed we found some great music to support our podcast, and we've provided a Spotify playlist of the full tracks on our website so you can take a longer listen, which we hope you'll do. And if you're a band with a song we should consider featuring, you can submit it on our website too. Crazy Good Turns is audio engineered by Stephen Key. Music supervision and mixing by Score in Los Angeles. And a special thanks to Megan Basinger. We hope you like our podcast and help us out by sharing us in your social networks and giving us a review on iTunes. Take care and let's connect again soon.
You wanna know why I keep waiting? I'm giving all my soul.